Have you ever felt so overwhelmed with the task of gaining victory over sin, over temptation, over things that separate you from God? I believe that many people become so discouraged that they give up, but I believe the Bible has many messages of hope. I want to encourage you to grab your Bibles handy, get a notebook handy, and take some screenshots as we progress today, because we're going to be looking at a number of Bible verses that give us a tremendous encouragement and message of hope. Let's begin in John 10 verse 10. God tells us here that Jesus did not come to destroy, but that He came to give us life and life in abundance. What a blessing! Psalm 119 verse 45 gives us a message that God's precepts and His laws are messages of liberty, of freedom, to set us free. Revelation chapter 2 and 3 repeats the phrase, "He who overcomes, he who overcomes." That means by implication that there will be a people who will overcome. What an incredible hope, but we want to discover how to be part of that group of people. In Revelation 21 verse 7, Jesus talks about he who overcomes. 1 John 5 verse 5 also refers to those who overcome. 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 24 says that God is the one who will accomplish it. Now here we start to uncover a few of the hints of how this will be accomplished in the end. And in this section, we read very clearly that God is the one who's going to do the accomplishing. Philippians 1 verse 6 also says that God will finish the good work He has begun. In other words, we're getting a clear hint here that we are not going to be the ones ultimately to do the overcoming, but God is going to accomplish a work in us and through us. But let's continue studying. 1 John 1 verse 9 says that He is faithful and just to complete the good work. John 8 verse 32 says that the truth will set you free. Now I want to ask you a question here. What is the truth that will set you free? Is it the truth that you just learn about, that you hear about, that you read about? Or is it truth that you take hold of and incorporate into your life? I took this picture on a farm where we spent a number of months, and I was always astonished to see how chickens care, or mother hens care for their little baby chicks. I've never seen a mother hen pecking her little babies, or grabbing them with her beak, or grabbing them with her claws to pull them in underneath her body. I've seen her over and over calling to them, making small sounds or communicating to them and calling them to respond. And then they needed to take the action. Those little chicks, as small and vulnerable as they are the ones who need to respond. They need to stop what they're doing, leave the little seeds or the little things that they are busy looking at on the ground, and pay attention to the mother hen and move to her and go in underneath her. In the Gospels, Jesus gives us a very sobering warning. He tells us that He is the one who looks at His people, that He wants to take us in under His wings like a mother hen protects her chicks, but we would not. He teaches us in these sad words that He is the one who wants to accomplish a work, yes, but we have to cooperate. And the limiting factor is not His willingness, but our cooperation. By implication, again, this must mean that there is something for us to do. The Bible does not only compare us as human beings to chickens, it also compares us to sheep. Jesus calls us His sheep in many places in the Bible, and He calls Himself the Good Shepherd. But He also says, "My sheep know my voice, and they follow me." How is it possible to follow if you cannot hear? Can a little chick respond to the mother hen if she's not able to understand the communication, to hear the sounds, to recognize the call? Can a sheep follow a shepherd if that sheep is not able to hear the voice of the shepherd or able to recognize the familiarity of that voice? It's impossible for us to follow if we cannot understand the communication, and you cannot communicate unless you have a brain. I know that it may sound quite strange to people when I say that you have to have a brain to communicate, but these are not my words. The Bible actually draws our special attention to the mind. Let's first look at a few verses that compare our bodies to a building. Jesus actually used this analogy when he was talking about raising up the temple in 3 days. The Bible tells us that he was referring to his body. In 1 Corinthians 6 verse 19, our bodies are likened to temples. In 1 Corinthians 3 verse 17, we're instructed to care for our bodies like for temples. Now let's think for a moment, what is a temple? A temple is a building, yes, but it is a special building. It is a building that is designed exclusively for the purpose of worship and communication, for connecting with our Creator. So our bodies are not only likened to any old building, it is likened to a holy, special building that is created for the purpose of communicating with God. This is an analogy used for our physical bodies. So the Bible is drawing our attention here to pay attention to how we look after our physical bodies as much as we would pay attention to our spiritual health. Luke 11 verse 34, Jesus tells us to keep our eyes focused on light and on truth. Now going on to another few verses that talk about the physical bodies that we live in. These verses not only compare our bodies to buildings, but they tell us what to do with our physical being. In Ephesians 5 verse 30, we're told that we are members of Christ's body, his flesh and his bones. And of course this is a metaphorical speech. It's not talking only about us as physical people, but as physical human beings we also form part of a physical church family. 1 Peter 2 verse 21 to 23 tells us that we have an example to follow. We are encouraged here to follow a very specific example. In Matthew 16 verse 24, we read that we should deny self and follow Jesus in example. 1 Corinthians 11 verse 1 tells us that we should imitate only those who follow Christ. In Ephesians 5 verse 1 and 2, we read that we should be imitating Christ. To imitate somebody is to do exactly what they did, and Jesus lived a sinless life. We are encouraged here to live a sinless life. And again, this can seem so overwhelming when we start looking at these verses, but let's continue our study. In Matthew 11 verse 29, we read another very special message that gives us more information about how this can be accomplished. Jesus invites those who are heavy laden. And when I think of the task of overcoming, of gaining victory over sin, I immediately feel heavy burdened. But Jesus sends an invitation specifically to me and to you in this verse. He tells us, "Come to me, all who are heavy laden. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me." What does it mean to be yoked together with Christ? You see, when you look at animals that are yoked together, when donkeys are pulling a cart together or horses are yoked together, any of these situations gives us a very clear picture of what Jesus is teaching us. It shows us that when you're yoked with somebody, you have to imitate them. You have to walk with them. You have to walk in the same direction at the same pace. But there's another special promise that comes through here. Jesus is not only encouraging us to walk as he walked, to imitate him, to go in the same direction, but he's also promising to carry that burden with us. He's telling us, you don't have to accomplish this on your own. I will be walking with you. I will carry the yoke with you, and I will be the guide, telling you in which direction to go. Now let's refocus on the verses that tell us what to do with our bodies. In 1 Corinthians 10 verse 31, we are told, "Whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God." I hope this verse will ring in your mind as you go through the next few days. Do all to the glory of God. And how do you do this? Can you make a clear decision? Can you establish, can you discern between the actions that will and will not bring glory to God? Unless you have a clear mind, let's look at what the Bible tells us. There are so many verses that encourage us. Titus 2 verse 6 exhorts us to be sober-minded. Titus 2 verse 4 says, "Teach to be sober." 1 Peter 5 verse 8 says, "Be sober and be vigilant." 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 6, "Watch and be sober." 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 8, "Be sober." 1 Peter 1 verse 13, "Gird up the loins of your mind." 1 Peter 4 verse 7, "Be sober." Psalm 51 verse 10 says, "Create in me a clean heart and renew a right spirit within me." The psalmist understands here that this requires action and help from God. It requires God to do creating and recreating, to do renewing in us. But we're going to continue reading how we play a part and a role in that. Romans 12 verse 1 and 2 again encourages us not to be conformed to the world, but to be renewed in our minds, drawing attention again that our minds require special attention. The book of Titus chapter 1 also gives us another example of how these different elements are drawn together. For a bishop must be blameless as the steward of God, not self-willed, not soon angry, not given to wine, no striker, not given to filthiness, but a lover of hospitality, a lover of good men, sober, just, holy, temperate, holding fast the faithful word as he hath been taught, that he may be able by sound doctrine both to exhort and to convince gainsayers. If we want to be an example to others, if we want others to see that we glorify God in our lives, we have to be sober, and we have to be able to think with clear minds, to discern sound doctrine. In Ephesians chapter 4, we read another encouragement, and I would go as far as saying an instruction, a command to put off the old man, to be renewed in the spirit of our minds, and that we would put on the new man, which was created according to God in true righteousness and holiness. We're exhorted here, we are encouraged here to live holy, righteous lives in the renewal of our minds. It begins in our minds. This is the message that I receive from these verses, that we have to be sober and that we have to protect our minds so that we can hear God's voice clearly as He is working in us to accomplish a good work. Now, friends, I want to remind you that it is with God's words that He created this whole world. He spoke light and sun, moon, stars, and everything around us in nature into existence. His words have creative power, and when He says something, He cannot lie. When He promises that He will finish the good work that He began in us, His words do not lie. They have creative power. So if we cling to these words and listen to them and obey them, we can have victory. It is possible for us to have sober minds. It is possible for us to gain victory over temptation and to live lives that glorify God. God cannot give us an instruction to eat or drink and do everything we do to the glory of God unless He is prepared and able to give us the ability to do so. And with those promises in mind, I want to invite you to continue studying with us in the week to come, because we're going to be continuing this process of looking at how the Bible teaches us to cooperate with the Lord. Nothing in the Bible tells us that God forces us to do anything against our will. In other words, the work that He is trying to accomplish in us requires our willing cooperation. Stay with us for these studies so that you can also learn how you can best protect your mind, how you can be sober, how you can cooperate with the Lord in the work that He's doing to gain victory in this life and for the life to come.